Around 66 million years ago, a catastrophic event occurred that would irreversibly alter the evolutionary trajectory of life on Earth: the impact of a massive asteroid in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. This event, known as the Chicxulub impact, is one of the most well-documented and significant mass extinction events in Earth's history. And before we continue, make sure to subscribe, please. Measuring approximately 10 to 15 kilometers in diameter, the asteroid slammed into Earth with an energy release estimated at over 1 billion times that of the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The impact site is marked by the Chicxulub crater, a geological formation over 180 kilometers wide, which provides enduring evidence of this calamitous event. Subsequent layers of sediment rich in iridium, an element rare on Earth's crust but abundant in asteroids, further support the extraterrestrial origin of the event. These geological and geochemical signatures have been discovered worldwide, forming a boundary known as the Cretaceous-Paleogene (KPG) boundary. The consequences of the impact were profound. Within moments, the immediate vicinity of the impact zone was obliterated. Shockwaves, wildfires, and mega tsunamis followed, affecting regions thousands of kilometers away. However, the most significant effect was the injection of dust, sulfate aerosols, and soot into the atmosphere. These particulates blocked sunlight for months or even years, plunging the planet into a nuclear winter scenario. The drop in global temperatures, coupled with the collapse of photosynthesis-based food chains, led to a mass extinction event that eradicated approximately 75% of Earth's species. Among the most famous casualties were the non-avian dinosaurs, which had been the dominant terrestrial vertebrates for over 160 million years. This extinction event marks a pivotal point in Earth's evolutionary history. Before the impact, the planet was teeming with a rich diversity of dinosaur species, ranging from the towering sauropods and predatory tyrannosaurs to the more bird-like dromaeosaurs and troodontids. Their extinction vacated ecological niches on a massive scale, setting the stage for the adaptive radiation of mammals. Freed from the constraints of dinosaurian dominance, mammals diversified rapidly during the Paleocene and Eocene epochs, eventually giving rise to primates, including Homo sapiens. The removal of non-avian dinosaurs allowed a previously subordinate group mammals to rise and dominate nearly all ecological niches. This development was not preordained. Had the asteroid impact not occurred, or had it played out differently, it is conceivable that mammals would have remained small, nocturnal insectivores, confined to ecological backwaters. The implication is profound. Human evolution may be a direct consequence of a singular, highly contingent event. In this light, the Chicxulub impact becomes not just a dramatic natural disaster, but a turning point that determined the evolutionary fate of the planet. This project undertakes a speculative yet scientifically grounded exploration of an alternate historon in which the Chicxulub asteroid missed Earth or disintegrated harmlessly in the atmosphere. In doing so, it seeks to answer a fascinating and complex question: what might life on Earth look like today if the non-avian dinosaurs had survived? By removing this singularly catastrophic event from Earth's historical timeline, we create a divergence point, a new path that life could have followed. This alternate history is not merely an exercise in imagination, but an inquiry rooted in evolutionary biology, paleontology, and climatology. It offers an opportunity to re-examine the dynamics of natural selection, contingency, and the intricate interplay between geology and biology. To explore this alternate Earth, the project will consider several interrelated aspects. It begins with an analysis of how the impact might have been averted and what conditions would have prevailed in the absence of a global extinction event. From there, it considers how dinosaur species, particularly those already exhibiting traits such as large brains, complex social behavior, and feathered bodies, might have continued to evolve. Could they have given rise to intelligent, tool-using species? Would any of them have developed civilizations? Could language, technology, or even space exploration have emerged in a world dominated by saurian life? Meanwhile, mammals absent the evolutionary space to diversify and dominate would likely have remained confined to marginal ecological roles. Their evolution would have followed very different paths, with reduced potential for large-bodied primates or advanced cognitive development. In this alternate scenario, mammals may have become highly specialized, but not particularly dominant, much like how marsupials fared in Australia after the breakup of Gondwana. The co-evolution of plants and animals would also have unfolded differently. Flowering plants, angiosperms, were already on the rise during the late Cretaceous and likely would have continued to spread, influencing herbivorous dinosaur evolution. Vast ecosystems shaped by massive herbivores, such as hadrosaurs and titanosaurs, would have continued to dominate the landscape, creating biomes entirely alien to modern Earth. The interaction between insect pollinators, plant species, and herbivorous dinosaurs would create a complex web of dependencies and adaptations that may have led to the emergence of entirely novel forms of life. Geophysical factors such as climate, ocean currents, and continental drift would have also played crucial roles. Without the temporary cooling caused by the asteroid impact, Earth might have experienced a relatively stable or warming climate during the early Paleogene. Volcanic activity, particularly the Deccan Traps eruptions, could still have influenced climate, but the absence of a global winter would have allowed Cretaceous ecosystems to persist into new epochs. The long-term movement of continents, including the isolation of Antarctica and the uplift of the Himalayas, would still have occurred, with profound implications for global climate and biodiversity. Crucially, this exploration will consider the potential for intelligent life to evolve in a world devoid of humans. Certain dinosaur groups, such as troodontids, already exhibited relatively high encephalization quotients, comparable in some cases to early mammals. If natural selection had continued to favor cognitive complexity in such lineages, it is plausible that intelligent, possibly sapient species could have evolved. These hypothetical beings, dubbed Dinosapiens in speculative literature, might have developed cultures, languages, and technologies suited to their physiology and environmental context. Their societies, shaped by different sensory modalities, morphologies, and ecological histories, would likely differ dramatically from our own. This project will culminate in a detailed depiction of an alternate Earth in the year 2025. It will consider the dominant species, ecosystems, and civilizations that might populate such a world. The absence of human civilization opens a window to imagine Earth as a more pristine planet, less impacted by industrialization, but possibly inhabited by other intelligent beings with their own histories, cultures, and challenges. The speculative visuals, timelines, evolutionary trees, and ecosystem maps will serve not only to illustrate, but to synthesize the alternate history proposed here. Ultimately, this speculative journey is grounded in real science. It is supported by fossil evidence, comparative anatomy, climate models, and evolutionary theory. Where evidence ends, informed speculation begins, but always with an eye toward plausibility. By imagining a world where one rock never fell from the sky, we gain a new perspective on our own evolutionary history. We come to appreciate the fragile contingency of existence, the immense influence of chance, and the deep interconnectedness of all life on Earth. In reimagining the consequences of the Chicxulub asteroid missing Earth, this project does not aim merely to entertain or to fantasize. Rather, it seeks to deepen our understanding of the forces that shape life and to highlight the delicate balance of circumstances that made human existence possible. It is a tribute to the complexity of evolutionary processes, the unpredictability of planetary history, and the infinite potential paths life might take given a slightly different roll of the cosmic dice. The divergence point in this alternate timeline is deceptively simple yet profoundly consequential. The asteroid that triggered the Cretaceous-Paleogene mass extinction either narrowly misses Earth or burns up in the atmosphere before impact. From a cosmic perspective, this requires only a minor alteration, perhaps a minuscule shift in the asteroid's trajectory millions of kilometers before it reached Earth, or a slight difference in the density or composition of its structure that causes it to fragment and vaporize harmlessly in the upper atmosphere. Such minor alterations in initial conditions would prevent one of the most cataclysmic events in Earth's history. The planet would continue its course uninterrupted by sudden, global-scale destruction. With no impact to disrupt the planet's climate, life at the end of the Cretaceous would transition into the Paleogene period under relatively stable environmental conditions. The Earth at this time was warm and humid, with no polar ice caps and high sea levels. Large inland seas still bisected continents, and lush forests blanketed much of the land. The breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea had already led to the separation of major landmasses, which were drifting toward their modern positions. The Atlantic Ocean was widening, India was moving rapidly northward toward Asia, and South America was beginning to part ways from Antarctica and Australia. These tectonic movements would continue to shape the geography and climate of Earth over the coming tens of millions of years, but without the immediate ecological disruption of the Chicxulub impact, the biosphere would remain far more stable. The Deccan Traps eruptions in present-day India, which coincided with the end of the Cretaceous, would still occur and contribute to some degree of environmental stress through the release of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide. These volcanic events might have induced moderate, gradual climatic fluctuations, including temporary warming and acidification of oceans, but without being compounded by the abrupt shock of an asteroid impact. These changes would be buffered by the resilience of established ecosystems. The pace of evolutionary adaptation would be sufficient to allow many species to endure and adapt to these relatively slow-moving environmental pressures. In this alternate scenario, the biodiversity of the late Cretaceous would persist and continue to evolve along trajectories already underway. The dinosaur clades that dominated terrestrial ecosystems, including ceratopsians, hadrosaurs, ankylosaurs, sauropods, and a wide array of theropods would retain their ecological dominance. These animals had already adapted to a variety of climatic zones, from polar forests to equatorial wetlands, and their physiological and behavioral plasticity suggests they would have continued to diversify in response to shifting habitats and climates. Marine ecosystems, which had also suffered heavily in the real-world extinction, would likewise avoid collapse. Mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, ammonites, and a wide array of marine invertebrates would maintain their ecological roles. Coral reefs and planktonic systems would persist without the rapid acidification and collapse triggered by the asteroid's aftermath. Likewise, pterosaurs, some of which had evolved into truly gigantic forms such as Quetzalcoatlus, would likely have remained dominant aerial predators and scavengers, competing with or complementing early avian species. Birds themselves, avian dinosaurs, would have continued to diversify, especially in arboreal and flight-specialized niches. While many of the earliest modern bird lineages were already emerging in the late Cretaceous, the extinction of their larger cousins in our timeline accelerated their radiation into all available aerial and terrestrial niches. Without that extinction bottleneck, birds would remain part of a broader clade of dinosaurs rather than emerging as the lone surviving lineage. Evolutionary pressures might still drive their diversification, but they would do so under the shadow of other dominant dinosaur lineages. Crucially, the climate remains a stabilizing factor in this timeline. The absence of the impact-induced impact winter allows photosynthesis to continue largely unimpeded. Plants, particularly flowering angiosperms, would retain their dominance and evolutionary momentum. These plants, in turn, would support a continued rise in insect diversity, including pollinators like bees and butterflies that had begun to flourish during the late Cretaceous. The mutualistic relationships between flowering plants and pollinating insects would become even more intricate and specialized, possibly leading to hyperdiverse and codependent evolutionary partnerships. Ecosystems would evolve gradually, allowing for the emergence of increasingly complex food webs rather than the disrupted and simplified ones that followed the KPG extinction in our timeline. With uninterrupted ecological continuity, evolutionary experimentation would likely flourish in an environment with high biodiversity and stable selection pressures. Unlike the post-extinction world, where mammals rapidly radiated to fill newly vacant niches, this alternate Cenozoic would be marked by long-term competition and coexistence between established dinosaur species and other vertebrates. The mammals of this world would remain largely constrained by the ecological dominance of dinosaurs. In this relatively stable dinosaur-centric world, mammals would likely retain their small body size, nocturnal habits, and opportunistic diets. The evolution of large-bodied mammals, including the ancestors of primates, ungulates, and carnivorans, would be drastically slowed or entirely suppressed by continued competition from large and mid-sized theropods and herbivorous dinosaurs. Not only would mammals remain marginal, but their evolutionary pressures would shift toward niche specialization rather than expansion into dominant forms. They might evolve into better burrowers, gliders, or aquatic forms, but without the environmental opportunities provided by the mass extinction, their macroevolutionary trajectory would be constrained. This would have enormous implications for the future of cognition and intelligence on Earth, since the mammalian line that ultimately led to primates and humans would not have the opportunity to proliferate and complexify in the same manner. Meanwhile, Earth's continents would continue to drift. India would still collide with Asia around 50 million years ago, giving rise to the Himalayan mountain range and altering global atmospheric circulation patterns. This uplift would intensify the monsoon system and begin the long-term sequestration of atmospheric COR through silicate weathering, contributing to a gradual global cooling trend. Similarly, the isolation of Antarctica from South America and Australia would allow the establishment of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, initiating glaciation on the southern continent. These long-term climatic changes would still occur, though perhaps at slightly different rates or intensities, due to the continued presence of widespread vegetation and stable ecosystems. The continued presence of dinosaurs through these climatic transitions suggests they would need to adapt to a broader range of environmental conditions than in the Mesozoic. This would favor the evolution of more endothermic physiology, broader dietary strategies, and perhaps even behavioral innovations such as migration, hibernation, or social thermoregulation. The trend toward feathered insulation in many theropods might accelerate under selective pressures from cooling climates, reinforcing the pre-existing trajectory toward greater metabolic efficiency and temperature regulation. In this alternate timeline, the Paleogene and Neogene periods would be marked not by the rise of mammals, but by the continued diversification and specialization of dinosaurs. Some lineages would likely go extinct due to localized pressures, competition, or shifting habitats, but no single group would dominate as unequivocally as mammals did in our history. Instead, the biosphere would be characterized by a complex mosaic of dominant species in different regions and ecological contexts. Gigantic herbivorous sauropods might persist in equatorial forests, while smaller but highly intelligent theropods patrol temperate zones. Avian and non-avian dinosaurs would compete and coexist in the skies, forests, and wetlands. This persistent complexity would shape the evolutionary landscape in ways difficult to predict. In particular, the lack of a biodiversity reset might mean fewer opportunities for radical innovation, but a greater likelihood of slow, continuous refinement and complexity. This dynamic would encourage the long-term development of traits such as social cooperation, communication, and even problem-solving in certain dinosaur lineages. As Earth's environment evolves through the Paleogene and Neogene, the consequences of the Chicxulub asteroid's absence become increasingly profound. The biosphere does not merely preserve its Cretaceous character, it evolves from it, elaborating upon its foundations with millions of years of uninterrupted diversification. Earth remains warm longer than in our history, with forests and wetlands dominating much of the globe. Glaciation, when it does occur, is patchy and less intense, delayed by centuries or millennia due to the unbroken strength of carbon sequestration by vast plant biomass. In this world, evolutionary change is driven not by sudden upheaval, but by the relentless force of natural selection acting on complex, interwoven ecosystems. Every lineage is pushed forward not because of sudden opportunities, but because of constant dynamic competition. In this slower, richer evolutionary tapestry, paths not taken in our timeline such as the possible rise of intelligent dinosaurs become not only plausible, but perhaps inevitable. This divergence point, where one rock never strikes Earth, reshapes all of life. It maintains a delicate continuity in the face of tectonic, climatic, and biological change, and it sets the stage for a planet that, though familiar in shape, would be utterly alien in life. By preserving the ecosystems of the Cretaceous, it extends their evolutionary narrative into epochs never written in our world, opening the door to new destinies and new dominions. With the Chicxulub impact averted, the non-avian dinosaurs continue their unbroken reign into the Paleogene and beyond, not as relics of a bygone age, but as dominant players in an evolving biosphere. The late Cretaceous already hosted an extraordinary diversity of dinosaur species, adapted to virtually every terrestrial niche. This diversity provided a strong evolutionary foundation upon which natural selection could continue to act. Without a mass extinction to clear the field, the evolutionary pressures on these species would favor refinement, innovation, and ecological specialization rather than wholesale replacement. The world would witness the flourishing of a dynasty that had already ruled for more than 160 million years, with even greater complexity arising from uninterrupted evolutionary continuity. Among the carnivorous theropods, smaller, more agile species such as the dromaeosaurs and troodontids were already showing signs of increased cognitive capacity, keen senses, and social behavior. These creatures, with their relatively large brain-to-body size ratios, binocular vision, and grasping forelimbs were particularly well positioned for evolutionary advancement. Troodontids, in particular, possessed some of the largest encephalization quotients of any known non-avian dinosaur, rivaling or exceeding that of many Mesozoic mammals. Their brains showed well-developed regions associated with sensory integration and problem-solving, suggesting they were capable of complex behavior. In a world without a reset, these dinosaurs would likely have continued to evolve along a trajectory favoring intelligence, adaptability, and social interaction. Over millions of years, selective pressures would favor even greater encephalization in some lineages. Environmental complexity, competition for prey, and the benefits of cooperation could drive the evolution of coordinated pack hunting, parental care, and territorial defense strategies. This behavioral sophistication would, in turn, support the development of more elaborate communication systems, possibly even the rudimentary precursors of language. Vocalizations, body posture, coloration, and display feathers could all serve as tools for conveying social information within groups. In this world, one could imagine flocks of small, feathered theropods coordinating hunts in dense forests or maintaining intricate social hierarchies within large communal nesting grounds. The evolution of manipulative ability would be another crucial factor. Many theropods already possessed semi-opposable digits, and with further refinement, some lineages could develop true grasping hands with increased tactile sensitivity. Such an adaptation, combined with cognitive complexity, would open the door to tool use. While the physics of theropod morphology would make delicate manipulation more challenging than for primates, natural selection tends to innovate within constraints. Beak-assisted manipulation, foot-based handling, or even cooperative tool use might emerge. It is plausible to imagine small, social theropods using sticks to probe for insects, rocks to crack open eggs, or constructed shelters to protect nests from predators and weather. Parallel to the development of intelligent theropods, other dinosaur clades would also be undergoing significant evolutionary changes. Herbivorous dinosaurs, such as hadrosaurs and ceratopsians, were already among the most behaviorally complex of their kind, showing evidence of vocal communication, herding behavior, and even potential parental care. These social systems could grow more intricate, with herds developing alarm calls, cooperative defense strategies, and migratory traditions. Evolution might select for better memory, spatial awareness, and even elements of culture passed between generations, not through language perhaps, but through imitation and social learning. In some regions, hadrosaurids might evolve into highly specialized grazers, akin to the ungulates of our own timeline. Their broad, grinding dental batteries and complex chewing mechanisms already paralleled those of modern herbivores, and the continuation of this trend could produce even more efficient plant processing adaptations. These changes would likely be accompanied by increasing specialization in locomotion, social organization, and seasonal movement. In forested areas, smaller ceratopsians or armored ankylosaurs might take on roles similar to modern deer or pigs, browsing in the understory and using their natural armaments for defense and dominance displays. Meanwhile, sauropods, if they managed to persist, would have continued to dominate certain ecosystems, particularly in equatorial floodplains and open savannas. Although their massive size made them vulnerable to environmental shifts, they also represented an evolutionary strategy of extreme energy efficiency and digestive persistence. Their long lifespans, slow metabolism, and herding behavior might lead to increasingly complex reproductive and migratory behaviors, perhaps similar to the great elephant migrations in Africa. In a stable climate, These mega-herbivores would remain a central force shaping vegetation patterns and the structure of ecosystems. Aquatic and semi-aquatic adaptations in dinosaurs would also continue to emerge and diversify. Though many large marine reptiles went extinct in our timeline due to the KPG event, their absence is not guaranteed in this alternate history. Mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and even certain crocodilian and turtle lineages might continue to evolve alongside aquatic dinosaurs adapted to freshwater and nearshore marine environments. Some theropods, already known for semi-aquatic behaviors, such as Spinosaurus, could give rise to specialized aquatic descendants. These creatures might develop features akin to penguins, otters, or even seals, combining powerful limbs, webbed feet, and streamlined bodies with strong predatory instincts and possibly complex social lives. Flighted dinosaurs, especially early birds, would continue their radiation without interruption. In our own world, modern birds exploded in diversity after the extinction event, quickly filling aerial niches left vacant by pterosaurs and smaller dinosaur species. Without that extinction, the aerial realm would become a competitive arena shared by multiple clades, advanced birds, persistent pterosaurs, and feathered gliders from various theropod branches. The evolutionary arms race for flight efficiency, sensory acuity, and navigational intelligence would drive the emergence of astonishing aerial adaptations. Songbirds might still evolve, their ecological equivalents might belong to entirely different lineages of dinosaurs with feathered wings and syrinx-like vocal apparatuses. Social flighted dinosaurs could evolve behaviors analogous to those of parrots, corvids, or bats, forming complex flocks, displaying advanced problem-solving skills, and even learning vocal patterns from conspecifics. Nesting colonies on cliffs or in dense forests could serve as centers for social learning, while migratory routes spanning continents would integrate behavioral traditions across generations. As continents drift and climates change, dinosaurs would respond with speciation, migration, and increasing adaptability. Mountain ranges and inland seas would isolate populations and drive allopatric speciation, producing a patchwork of unique dinosaur faunas across the globe. Tropical rainforests in equatorial regions might become hotspots of small, agile, highly intelligent species, while high-latitude forests would select for insulated, cold-tolerant forms. Island biogeography would favor miniaturization or gigantism depending on ecological context, leading to dwarf theropods or titanic, flightless birds filling ground-based niches. Given the observed trend toward greater behavioral complexity in multiple dinosaur groups, it is conceivable that more than one lineage would move toward proto-intelligent behavior. Just as primates, cetaceans, elephants, and corvids all show elements of advanced cognition in our world, different dinosaur lineage, avian and non-avian alike, could develop intelligence independently. A feathered, warm-blooded, bipedal predator might evolve into a being with memory, planning, and abstract reasoning. A social, vocal, flocking species might build communal structures, use tools for foraging, and pass down learned behaviors across generations. The evolutionary pathways leading to intelligence are not linear or inevitable, but they are potentiated by certain anatomical and ecological traits: high sensory input, parental investment, social complexity, but DCVES, and manipulative ability. In the dinosaur world of this alternate Earth, these traits are not only present but encouraged by stable environments, intense interspecific competition, and evolutionary continuity. Over tens of millions of years, they could give rise to species capable of abstract thought, planning, empathy, and even cultural transmission. The implications of such developments are profound. In this alternate evolutionary history, the Earth may host one or more intelligent dinosaur species. Sapient beings evolved not from mammals but from theropods. Their physical forms might include feathered bodies, binocular eyes, flexible beaks, clawed hands, and powerful hind limbs. Their cognition could rival or exceed that of early humans, shaped not by the same neural architectures, but by analogous functional capacities. Such beings might build nests or shelters, hunt cooperatively, navigate by stars or magnetic fields, and eventually develop symbolic communication systems. Though their technology might evolve more slowly due to anatomical constraints, it is not inconceivable that given millions of years, they might discover fire, forge tools, and eventually create civilizations. In the grand tapestry of life, the uninterrupted survival of dinosaurs ensures that Earth's dominant life forms remain saurian, not mammalian. The pathways of evolution would diverge wildly from our own, producing ecosystems shaped by beings with entirely different histories, bodies, and modes of perception. The world would be filled with the sounds of calls, rustling feathers, pounding footfalls, and the ceaseless interplay of minds very different from our own but no less capable of wonder, curiosity, and adaptation. The age of dinosaurs would not be a fossilized memory, but an unfolding story of continued ascent in evolutionary saga reaching heights never imagined in the shadow of extinction. Mammals, in this alternate world where the non-avian dinosaurs never went extinct, would have remained a secondary evolutionary thread, constrained by the pervasive ecological dominance of their dinosaurian contemporaries. In the late Cretaceous, mammals had already achieved a modest diversity, primarily as small-bodied, nocturnal insectivores and omnivores. Their evolutionary strategies were adapted to survival in a world ruled by vastly larger and more powerful reptiles. Without the ecological vacuum created by the Chicxulub impact, these conditions would persist into the Paleogene and Neogene epochs, shaping mammalian evolution along a path marked by continued marginality, specialization, and stasis punctuated only by rare adaptive breakthroughs. Rather than expanding dramatically in body size and ecological scope, mammals would remain relegated to the peripheries of terrestrial life. In forests and underbrush, they would scurry under leaf litter and among roots, foraging at night to avoid detection by diurnal predatory theropods. Their sensory adaptations, acute olfaction, sensitive hearing, and low-light vision, would be refined further over time. These mammals might evolve even more specialized nocturnal lifestyles, possibly developing elaborate echolocation systems similar to those seen in modern bats or small, subterranean insectivores. Their niche would be one of evasion, concealment, and exploitation of overlooked resources. Burrowing would become an increasingly favored strategy. Some lineages might evolve into specialized fossorial creatures with reinforced skulls, spade-like forelimbs, and highly efficient thermoregulation. In environments where the pressure from surface-dwelling predators was intense, these mammals could live entirely below ground, subsisting on roots, fungi, and invertebrates. Their eyes might diminish, replaced by advanced tactile systems such as whiskers or electroreceptive capabilities. Mole-like forms could emerge in various sizes and habitats, occupying ecological roles in temperate forests, tropical jungles, and even high-altitude environments. In arboreal habitats, small climbing mammals would thrive in the canopy layers. Here, they would compete with small feathered theropods for insects, fruit, and shelter. Gliding adaptations might arise independently in multiple lineages. Like modern flying squirrels or colugos, these mammals could develop membranous skin stretched between their limbs, allowing them to navigate from tree to tree without descending into the dangerous understory. Their survival would depend on speed, stealth, and the ability to forage discreetly among leaves, bark, and epiphytes. Dietary specialization would be another key to survival. With dominant herbivorous niches occupied by dinosaurs, mammals would focus on consuming items avoided by larger animals: insects, nectar, carrion, small reptiles, seeds, and underground tubers. Some might evolve venomous saliva to subdue prey quickly and silently. Others could develop long, probing snouts or tongues to extract food from narrow crevices. Carnivorous forms would remain limited in size, constrained by the presence of larger theropod predators and the risk of exposure in open terrain. One notable effect of this evolutionary bottleneck would be a delay or total suppression of large-bodied mammalian forms. Without the extinction of large dinosaurs, there would be little opportunity for mammals to evolve into apex predators, megaherbivores, or dominant omnivores. This would preclude the emergence of familiar mammalian groups like proboscideans, ungulates, and large carnivorans. The adaptive radiation that, in our history, occurred during the Paleocene and Eocene would be truncated into minor, constrained evolutionary experiments with little impact on broader ecosystems. Primates, if they evolved at all, would be confined to diminutive, secretive niches. In this timeline, the early ancestors of lemurs and tarsiers might emerge as small, nocturnal insectivores living in the highest branches of dense forest canopies. However, the absence of open ecological space would inhibit their encephalization and social complexity. There would be little advantage to developing advanced cognition or tool use in environments where competition was best avoided, not engaged. The sequence of events leading from tree-dwelling primates to bipedal hominins would never begin. This suppression of mammalian expansion would also limit the development of long-term parental care and extended juvenile learning hallmarks of more cognitively complex mammals. Without the pressures and opportunities that select for these traits, most mammals would reproduce quickly, mature rapidly, and live short, furtive lives. There would be few pathways to evolve large brains, complex behaviors, or social structures beyond simple pair bonding or loose foraging aggregations. Despite these constraints, the resilience and adaptability of mammals would still allow them to explore highly specialized and inaccessible niches. Aquatic environments, for example, could offer refuge from dinosaurian competition. In lakes, rivers, and coastal shallows, some mammals might transition to semi-aquatic lifestyles, evolving webbed feet, dense fur, and adaptations for swimming and underwater foraging. While large marine reptiles and aquatic dinosaurs would dominate open seas, freshwater systems might host beaver-like engineers, otter-like hunters, and platypus-like generalists. These mammals could shape their microhabitats through dam building, burrowing, and food caching, becoming subtle ecological influencers without ever challenging dominant fauna. Isolated ecosystems such as islands or mountain valleys might provide temporary relief from dinosaurian oversight. On islands, mammals could undergo adaptive radiation in the absence of large predators. Some lineages might attain modest sizes, developing into herbivorous browsers or ground-dwelling omnivores. However, these forms would be exceptionally vulnerable to reintroduction of dinosaurian competitors, and their evolutionary experiments would often be short-lived. In montane environments, small mammals adapted to cooler climates might eke out an existence among rocks and alpine vegetation, their lives dictated by seasonal cycles and high-altitude food scarcity. Convergence would also play a role in mammalian evolution. Even within their restricted niches, mammals might evolve analogous forms to familiar animals in our world. Mole-like insectivores, squirrel-like gliders, shrew-like foragers, and bat-like flyers would all likely emerge independently. In aquatic settings, we might see the rise of dolphin-like echolocators or otter-like swimmers, though at smaller sizes and more limited ecological impact. These forms would reflect common solutions to environmental challenges, even in the absence of the same ecological opportunities that shaped our own biosphere. In terms of reproductive strategy, most mammals in this world would retain high fecundity and short gestation periods. The energy investment required for long gestation and extensive postnatal care would be evolutionarily costly in a world dominated by large predators. Marsupial and monotreme strategies might become more prevalent, with shorter internal development and extended external care in pouches or protected nests. Placental reproduction might be maintained in certain lineages, especially those able to isolate themselves from intense predation, but would not achieve the level of dominance seen in our timeline. Mammalian communication would likely rely on chemical and tactile signals, with some acoustic elements used in safe or underground settings. Complex vocalizations, territorial calls, or social grooming behaviors would remain rudimentary, confined to the needs of small, secretive groups. Brain expansion beyond basic environmental processing and survival problem-solving would remain rare and discouraged by selective pressures favoring simplicity and energy efficiency. As millions of years passed, a mosaic of specialized mammalian forms would persist across the globe, largely unknown to or ignored by the towering reptiles that continued to command the Earth. In ecosystems shaped by the weight and hunger of dinosaurs, mammals would remain the quiet survivors, tucked into corners of the biosphere, ubiquitous yet unnoticed, varied but never dominant. Their world would be one of shadows, underground chambers, midnight foraging, and whispered movements in the canopy. While these mammals would never invent language or build tools, they would succeed in the evolutionary sense, surviving, adapting, and spreading across nearly every terrestrial and freshwater environment. Evolution does not reward potential, only persistence, and in this dinosaur-dominated Earth, persistence would be their defining trait. The mammals would not vanish. They would become the unsung background chorus in the grand opera of dinosaurian life, enduring, observing, and quietly continuing their slow, constrained dance through deep time. In a world where the non-avian dinosaurs never went extinct, the fabric of terrestrial ecosystems would be woven with threads both familiar and alien, an intricate web shaped not only by fauna, but equally by flora. Plants, like animals, are participants in the evolutionary drama, responding to and co-evolving with the animals that feed on them, pollinate them, and distribute their seeds. Without the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous, plant life would evolve along a continuum uninterrupted by ecological collapse. The evolutionary trends already underway during the late Cretaceous would deepen, diversify, and expand. As a result, the terrestrial biosphere of this alternate Earth would likely be even more densely vegetated, structurally complex, and biologically entangled than our own. Angiosperms, the flowering plants, had already achieved a broad ecological presence by the end of the Cretaceous. Their rapid reproductive cycles, coevolution with insect pollinators, and ability to colonize disturbed environments gave them a competitive edge over gymnosperms in many regions. In this alternate history, their dominance would continue and intensify. However, without the extinction event that wiped out many insect lineages and opened new opportunities for angiosperms in the Paleogene, the pace and direction of their diversification might be different. Rather than rapidly radiating into all available plant niches, as they did in our world, Angiosperms would evolve in prolonged interaction with established competitors like cycads, conifers, ginkgos, and ferns, all of which would persist in greater abundance. The continued existence of massive herbivorous dinosaurs would significantly shape plant evolution. Hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, sauropods, and ankylosaurs, with their immense appetites and movement patterns, exert pressure on vegetation not just through consumption, but also by trampling, seed dispersal, and soil disturbance. Plants in this world would have to contend with massive grazers that could strip foliage high above the ground or uproot entire shrubs in a single mouthful. In response, many angiosperms would evolve defensive adaptations such as toxins, spines, fibrous tissues, and mutualistic relationships with protective insects or microbial communities. These adaptations would likely surpass the chemical complexity seen in our own flora, driven by a never-ending arms race between plant defenses and dinosaur digestive strategies. The scale of herbivory would also influence forest architecture. In regions dominated by gigantic sauropods and hadrosaurs, tree species might grow taller with more resilient bark and elevated canopies, reducing accessible foliage at ground level. The understory could be sparse in such forests, shaped by constant trampling and limited light. In contrast, areas with smaller herbivores or fewer megafauna might support lush undergrowth, promoting the evolution of shade-tolerant species and dense shrub layers. Epiphytes, vines, and parasitic plants could become dominant features of the canopy and mid-level vegetation, benefiting from dinosaur-mediated gaps in the forest as well as arboreal faunal interactions. Grass, a relatively minor component of late Cretaceous flora, might remain underdeveloped in this timeline. The widespread expansion of grasslands in our world was, in part, enabled by the extinction of forest-dwelling dinosaurs and the later proliferation of grazing mammals. Without this shift, grassland biomes might remain rare or be limited to arid, fire-prone regions where tree growth is inhibited. Instead, the dominant plant communities would be diverse types of forests, wetlands, riparian systems, and swampy lowlands dense, layered habitats that cater to a rich variety of dinosaur species. Seed dispersal strategies in this alternate world would reflect the ongoing influence of dinosaurs. Many plants in the late Cretaceous had already evolved fleshy fruits, possibly as a mechanism to attract small, omnivorous or frugivorous dinosaurs and early birds. These trends would continue and diversify. We would likely see a tremendous variety of fruit shapes, sizes, colors, and nutrient compositions, each adapted to the dietary preferences of different dinosaur species. Some trees might evolve to produce fruit only at heights accessible to specific herbivores, ensuring selective seed dispersal. Others might develop protective mechanisms that require passage through a dinosaur's gut to trigger germination, a coevolutionary mechanism already observed in some modern plant-mammal relationships. Pollination networks would become even more elaborate. The late Cretaceous was a period of significant insect diversification, with bees, beetles, flies, and butterflies playing increasing roles in pollination. In the absence of extinction, these lineages would continue to evolve in concert with flowering plants, producing hyper-specialized mutualisms. Some flowers might evolve highly specific morphologies, colors, or scent profiles to attract a narrow range of pollinators. Other plants could utilize visual mimicry, temporal blooming patterns, or synchronized mass flowering events to enhance pollination efficiency. Dinosaurs themselves, especially small, feathered omnivores or nectar-feeding species, might become integral to pollination in certain ecosystems, similar to how birds and bats function today. Fungi would thrive in this richly vegetated world. Decomposers would benefit from the constant rain of dinosaur dung, decaying plant matter, and fallen logs in forests unbroken by mass extinction. Mycorrhizal associations between fungi and plant roots would become increasingly complex and critical for nutrient cycling. The soil biota of this alternate Earth would be rich beyond modern comparison, a subterranean mirror of the teeming life above. The size and behavior of dinosaur herbivores would also influence fire regimes. With dense biomass and copious dung, some regions might be prone to periodic natural fires. Plant species adapted to fire could evolve features like thick bark, serotinous cones, or rapid post-fire regeneration. However, dinosaurs may inadvertently help suppress fires in some regions by consuming large amounts of flammable vegetation, keeping fuel loads low. Their trails and wallows could create natural fire breaks, influencing both fire dynamics and vegetation structure over large landscapes. Wetlands, swamps, and floodplains would continue to serve as biodiversity hotspots. Many dinosaurs were adapted to such environments, and their presence would maintain high levels of disturbance and nutrient cycling. Aquatic plants like horsetails, ferns, and emergent angiosperms would dominate in such regions, forming dense mats and floating islands where unique species interactions could flourish. Amphibians, insects, small mammals, and semi-aquatic dinosaurs would all benefit from these dynamic ecosystems. The stability and continuity of these wetlands over millions of years would allow long-term coevolutionary dynamics to play out in extraordinary detail. In high-latitude regions, the persistence of deciduous forests dominated by conifers and early angiosperms would create seasonal ecosystems with dramatic cycles of abundance and scarcity. Migratory behaviors in both dinosaurs and birds could evolve in response to these cycles. Trees might evolve synchronized leaf-out and drop schedules, while fruiting periods could align with migratory arrivals of key dispersers. Over geological time, glacial cycles could still arise due to tectonic and orbital factors, putting additional pressure on plants and animals to adapt to climatic variability. Islands and isolated landmasses would provide natural laboratories for botanical experimentation. On such landforms, dinosaur presence might be reduced or absent, allowing for the evolution of novel plant forms, potentially including large woody herbs, oversized fruits, or plant-animal mutualisms absent from continental ecosystems. These isolated systems might produce oddities similar to the unique floras of the Galapagos or New Caledonia, shaped by endemic pressures and founder effects. Altogether, the Earth's ecosystems in this alternate history would be vast, interconnected, and deeply layered. Rather than being defined by rapid succession following extinction, they would be characterized by long-term ecological entrenchment. Biodiversity would be high, but novelty would arise through intricate coevolution rather than sudden adaptive radiations. The plants would not merely persist, they would evolve into forms and functions that serve, resist, manipulate, or partner with the ever-present dinosaurs. Forests would be deeper and more ancient, full of complex strata and specialized biota. Wetlands would shimmer with biodiversity, thick with spore-producing plants, flowering aquatic herbs, and vines that wind through dinosaur-trampled reeds. Mountain slopes would host unique floral communities adapted to the slow uplift of tectonic plates and the migration routes of cold-adapted species. Even deserts, where plants must contend with limited water and nutrient-poor soils, would exhibit unique solutions influenced by ancient plant-dinosaur relationship succulents with reinforced skins to deter herbivory. Deep-rooted shrubs that flower only in response to dinosaur activity or drought stress. This world, green and ancient, would pulse with life of a different rhythm, not faster or slower, but shaped by evolutionary pressures that favored continuity over rupture, relationship over revolution. Plants would not be passive scenery. They would be dynamic actors in the shaping of biospheres, molded by millions of years of interaction with dinosaurs that walk, graze, nest, pollinate, and disperse in ways that only such a world unbroken by fire from the sky could ever produce. In a world untouched by the Chicxulub impact, Earth's climate system and geographic evolution would proceed along paths both similar and fundamentally altered from the trajectory of our reality. While the grand-scale processes of plate tectonics, volcanism, and orbital forcing would remain consistent, the natural outcomes of planetary physics and geodynamics, the absence of the impact's immediate climatic shock and long-term biospheric reset would profoundly influence how these forces interact with life and each other. The result is a Cenozoic Earth with a recognizable shape but unfamiliar rhythm zone, where climate transitions occur with more biological continuity, and where continental arrangements shape ecosystems dominated by a persistent Mesozoic lineage. At the moment of divergence, the Earth of the late Cretaceous is a warm greenhouse planet. There are no permanent ice caps, and sea levels are significantly higher than modern levels. Vast shallow inland seas extend across North America, Europe, and parts of Asia. The continents are in motion, slowly drifting toward their present positions, and this tectonic activity will continue to have profound climatic consequences. India is on a collision course with Asia, destined to give rise to the Himalayan orogeny, while the South Atlantic is opening, and Australia is separating from Antarctica. In our own timeline, the Chicxulub impact contributed to a brief but severe cooling event, a dramatic interruption of the Cretaceous greenhouse that set off complex feedback loops in the climate system. In this alternate timeline, that sudden forcing never occurs. Instead, climate trends evolve more gradually, modulated by volcanism, solar cycles, orbital dynamics, and the ever-shifting patterns of ocean currents and atmospheric circulation. The Deccan traps, which still erupt in India over hundreds of thousands of years, do contribute substantial amounts of COR and aerosols to the atmosphere, causing transient warming and regional acid rain, but without the synergistic shock of an asteroid. Their long-term effect on global temperatures is muted. The early Paleogene in this alternate Earth continues to be dominated by a warm, equable climate. Tropical and subtropical zones extend far beyond the equator, and polar regions, though subject to seasonal variation, remain forested and ice-free. Forest biomes, already diverse in the Cretaceous, spread across nearly all landmasses, creating an almost continuous canopy of green that stretches from coast to coast on every continent. These forests support vast populations of herbivorous dinosaurs, which in turn shape the distribution and composition of vegetation through feeding, migration, and seed dispersal. Sea levels remain high for tens of millions of years longer than they did in our own history. With no abrupt climate-induced glaciation and fewer extinction-driven ecological resets to alter biogeochemical cycles, ocean temperatures and chemistry change more slowly. Coral reefs maintain their continuity across time, never suffering the abrupt die-offs that punctuated the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary. The evolutionary continuity of marine life leads to the persistence of reef systems teeming with ammonites, rudists, and ancient fish lineages that never faced the pressures of post-impact turnover. As the continents continue to drift, their movement gradually reshapes the ocean basins and global current systems. The collision of India with Asia triggers the slow rise of the Himalayan mountains around 50 million years ago, just as in our world. This massive orogenic event alters atmospheric circulation patterns by generating monsoonal systems and redirecting jet streams. The uplift also enhances silicate weathering, which acts as a long-term carbon sink, drawing down atmospheric COR and slowly contributing to global cooling. However, without the initial head start of impact-induced cooling, this process occurs more gradually, unfolding over tens of millions of years rather than in a few millennia. A similar dynamic unfolds as Antarctica becomes isolated from South America and Australia. The formation of the Drake Passage and the establishment of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current help to thermally isolate the southern continent. In our world, this leads to the rapid onset of Antarctic glaciation around 34 million years ago. In this alternate timeline, the same outcome eventually occurs, but more slowly and later. Forests persist on Antarctica for longer, harboring cold-adapted dinosaurs, flowering plants, and amphibians until permanent ice sheets finally begin to form. The slower pace of this transformation allows for longer evolutionary adaptations to high-latitude conditions, such as feathers, hibernation-like behaviors, or cold-resilient physiology in dinosaurian lineages. Climatic fluctuations still occur in response to orbital variations. Milankovitch cycles influence the distribution of solar radiation, leading to glacial-interglacial rhythms, particularly later in the Cenozoic. However, the amplitudes of these cycles are tempered by the dense vegetative cover and long-term carbon regulation mechanisms that were never disrupted by mass extinction. The climate remains relatively stable over geologic timescales, with fewer abrupt transitions and longer periods of equilibrium. The global carbon cycle is dominated by the interplay between plants, soil organisms, and the weathering of exposed mountain ranges, rather than by the pulses of greenhouse gas emissions and sequestration associated with mass extinctions and subsequent radiations. Volcanism continues to be an important climatic force. Mid-ocean ridges, hotspot volcanism, such as that which form the Hawaiian Islands, and large igneous provinces contribute gases and particulates to the atmosphere. Periodic episodes of heightened volcanic activity may cause short-term warming events or regional climate perturbations, such as those seen in our world during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. But again, without the background stress of biosphere collapse, ecosystems are more resilient and able to adapt to these changes without significant faunal turnover. One striking feature of this alternate Earth is the ongoing feedback loop between climate and vegetation. The dominance of large herbivorous dinosaurs maintains open forest pathways, affects the spatial structure of biomes, and contributes to atmospheric COR cycling through respiration and the decomposition of organic matter. In a world where forests are rarely cleared by fire or agricultural practices, the biogenic contributions of dinosaur megafauna become a central component of climate regulation. In turn, stable climate fosters stable ecosystems, which feed back into climate moderation. This feedback loop reinforces long-term planetary homeostasis, interrupted only slowly by tectonic or astronomical factors. The geography of the continents by the modern day in this timeline would be similar in outline to our own, but the internal composition of ecosystems would be wholly different. The Americas are connected by the Isthmus of Panama, allowing faunal exchange between northern and southern dinosaur species, while Europe and Asia remain largely continuous, forming a vast Eurasian supercontinent. Africa retains its tropical interior, dominated by immense forests and arid savannas shaped by dinosaur migration corridors. Australia, long isolated, develops a unique suite of endemic dinosaur species, smaller, flight-capable, and cold-adapted forms that fill ecological roles without mammalian competitors. Antarctica is partially glaciated, but retains regions of temperate vegetation near geothermal hotspots. Mountain ranges like the Rockies, Andes, Alps, and Himalayas shape local climates through rain shadows, altitudinal zonation, and wind patterns. These geographic features drive microclimates and regional biodiversity, but without the radical extinction bottlenecks that reshuffled biogeography in our own world, lineages maintain continuity over millions of years. Species ranges expand and contract with climate shifts but rarely go extinct. Ecological memory, the evolutionary imprint of long-standing relationships, is stronger, more layered, and more complex. In the oceans, geography also shapes climate. The flow of the Gulf Stream, the Kuroshio Current, and the Antarctic Circumpolar Current modulates temperatures and precipitation patterns across continents. In the absence of an extinction reset, marine food webs retain ancient forms. Plankton, invertebrates, and tectonic predators evolve continuously, but without sudden disruption. Climate feedbacks between ocean temperature, albedo, and carbon cycling evolve slowly, governed by long-term interactions between geography and biology rather than punctuated events. The planet, by 2025 in this alternate reality, remains biologically vibrant and climatically stable, warmer than our own Earth, with higher sea levels, broader tropical zones, and fewer glaciated regions. The poles are colder than during the Cretaceous, but still harbor biological activity. Sea levels, although gradually declining due to ice accumulation and tectonic shifts, remain significantly above modern levels, submerging many low-lying areas that in our world support large human populations. Coastal environments are dominated by mangrove forests, estuarine wetlands, and shallow lagoons, hosting a mix of marine reptiles, aquatic dinosaurs, and highly adapted invertebrates. In sum, the long-term climate and geography of this Earth evolve according to familiar tectonic and orbital rhythms, but without the trauma of a mass extinction. The biological systems buffering the planet are stronger and more continuous. Climate change still happens, but life responds through adaptation rather than collapse. Geography still shifts, but ecosystems move with it rather than being remade from scratch. And in this deeply interconnected world, the long dance of life and planet continues, unbroken and ever unfolding. On this alternate Earth where the Chicxulub asteroid never struck, evolution continues along an unbroken path from the Mesozoic into the present. The mass extinction that, in our reality, swept aside the non-avian dinosaurs and allowed mammals to radiate into vacant ecological niches never happens. As a result, the evolutionary tree retains its dominant branches, specifically the diverse clades of theropod dinosaurs, many of which had already begun developing characteristics conducive to complex behaviors, high-level cognition, and potentially even culture. This scenario presents a unique opportunity to explore whether sapient life capable of technology, social organization, and symbolic thought could have evolved from dinosaurian ancestors instead of mammals, and if so, what form such life might take in the absence of humans. The primary candidates for evolving intelligence in this world are not the towering apex predators like Tyrannosaurus rex or the massive sauropods, but rather the small to medium-sized theropods already showing advanced cognitive traits by the end of the Cretaceous. Among these, the troodontids stand out for their relatively large brain-to-body size ratio, of the highest among non-avian dinosaurs, and their complex sensory apparatus. Fossil evidence indicates that troodontids had large eyes, stereoscopic vision, and potentially acute hearing, traits associated with predation and detailed environmental processing. These are the same general attributes observed in animals with a high capacity for learning and adaptive behavior. Troodontids also exhibited grasping hands, semi-manipulative digits, and possibly even rudimentary social behavior. In this alternate timeline, uninterrupted by extinction, such traits would have been subjected to millions of additional years of selective pressure. Given the correlation in modern animals between ecological complexity, social learning, and cognitive expansion, it's plausible that these dinosaurs living in complex environments and interacting socially would continue to develop higher intelligence. Neural architectures already present would become more elaborate, potentially leading to advanced problem-solving skills, tool use, and communication systems. Closely related clades like dromaeosaurs and oviraptorosaurs also demonstrate features conducive to increased encephalization and behavioral plasticity. Dromaeosaurs, which include Velociraptor and its relatives, were likely pack hunters, indicating coordinated activity and possibly proto-social structures. Some oviraptorosaurs, known from nesting sites and brooding postures, hint at extended parental care, which is often a prerequisite for transmitting learned behaviors across generations. These behaviors provide a foundation for cultural evolution, a process in which ideas and skills accumulate and are refined over time, becoming independent of genetic inheritance. If we consider the trajectory of avian evolution already underway by the late Cretaceous, we find even more compelling parallels. Birds, as living theropods, exhibit impressive cognitive capacities. Corvids and parrots, in particular, show the ability to use tools, solve abstract problems, plan for future needs, and even understand aspects of cause and effect. These behaviors rival those of many primates and support the notion that dinosaurian brain structures were already capable of supporting intelligence on par with mammals, albeit organized differently. In this alternate Earth, we might imagine troodontid descendants evolving over tens of millions of years into increasingly sophisticated forms. The constraints of biology and physics would still apply. Bipedalism provides a strong evolutionary advantage for terrestrial animals with forward-facing vision and the ability to manipulate objects. As a result, sapient dinosaurs may resemble erect, lightly built bipeds with flexible arms, three-fingered hands, and large cranial capacities. Feathers, already present in many of their ancestors, would persist for thermoregulation, display, and possibly social signaling. Unlike mammals, these beings would have air sac systems and possibly a higher metabolic efficiency, allowing for endurance and a rapid response to environmental stimuli. The development of tool use would hinge on the evolution of fine motor control and cognitive mapping. A grasping hand with opposable or semi-opposable digits would be essential, something within reach for many maniraptoran dinosaurs. Early tools may have involved sticks, stones, or bones used for digging, hunting, or foraging. Over time, material culture could emerge. Shelters constructed from plant matter, nests reinforced with found materials, and eventually, controlled use of fire. While the biological substrates differ, the functional pathway to technological civilization mirrors the path taken by hominins, driven by ecological necessity, social competition, and feedback loops of innovation. Language presents another threshold. Vocalization in birds is a complex neurological and behavioral process involving specialized brain regions and learned behaviors. If similar capabilities existed in non-avian Maniraptorancer, if they continued to evolve along the avian trajectory, then a vocal form of communication could develop. Over time, This could shift from basic calls to symbolic language, eventually enabling abstract communication, the transmission of culture, and collective problem-solving. Alternative communication methods, such as body posture, color displays, or tactile signals, might also play a role in early social cohesion. Social structures in these intelligent dinosaurs would likely be complex and hierarchical, reflecting patterns seen in modern birds and mammals. Cooperative hunting, territory defense, and group parenting could all serve as contexts in which intelligence is rewarded. With time, these behaviors might evolve into institutions, clans, tribes, or even early polity structured, not just by dominance, but by shared norms, goals, and knowledge. The rise of proto-civilizations would depend on the intersection of ecological pressures and cognitive capabilities, but with uninterrupted time, it becomes a plausible outcome. The evolution of agriculture, or at least systematic environmental management, would mark a key transition in sapient dinosaur societies. Many herbivorous dinosaurs already had complex digestive systems adapted to specific plants, and their descendants could develop controlled foraging or plant cultivation practices. Carnivorous sapiens might domesticate prey species, manage hunting territories, or engage in seasonal migrations guided by celestial observations. These behaviors, while different from human agriculture, fulfill similar ecological roles, intentionally shaping the environment for predictability and surplus. Technological development would be constrained by available materials, fine motor skills, and cognitive thresholds. Early tools might remain relatively crude for long periods, as in the history of Homo erectus, until a cognitive tipping point allowed for the abstraction of design and the refinement of technique. Fire would revolutionize cooking, protection, and metallurgy. The invention of the wheeler, some analog adapted to the terrain and morphology of dinosaur societies, could follow, alongside rudimentary construction, transport, and infrastructure. Architecture on this alternate Earth would differ from ours in both style and substance. Thermoregulation might be prioritized over verticality. Nest mound cities, like termite colonies or bowerbird structures, could influence the design of living spaces. Ornamentation may derive from natural materials like feathers, bones, or bioluminescent flora. Stone tools could evolve into metal ones, and eventually, knowledge of chemistry, astronomy, and mathematics might develop in parallel with increasing urban complexity. Over geologic time, an intelligent dinosaurian species could reach an industrial level of technology. Powered flight via gliders or airships may follow the observation of volant kin. Writing, numerical systems, and symbolic art would emerge as culture deepens. Given sufficient continuity, these beings could achieve a form of space exploration, perhaps with different technological emphasis than ours, more organic or analog in design. They may develop a cultural or philosophical framework rooted not in primate ancestry, but in their own ecological heritage that values continuity with nature, ancestral memory, or the cyclic patterns of the Earth. The presence of such a civilization in 2025 would mean a world in which large parts of the planet are shaped not by roads, skyscrapers, or industrial agriculture, but by sprawling dinosaurian settlements built in harmony with forest canopies, river systems, or open plains. Their understanding of the world might be holistic, focused on ecological interdependence and multisensory experience rather than written abstraction alone. Their science might evolve through deep observation and mimicry, like that of certain birds or octopuses, rather than through isolated experimentation. Alternatively, multiple intelligent lineages might arise independently. Oviraptorosaurs, which show nesting fidelity and possible group coordination, could evolve sapiens in different ecological contexts: desert versus forest, plains versus highlands. Such diversity might lead to competing cultures or cooperative species alliances. The outcome would not be a single dominant species, but a complex mosaic of intelligent beings with different physiologies, histories, and philosophies, shaped by millions of years of uninterrupted evolution. In this scenario, intelligence is not uniquely mammalian nor inevitably human-like. It emerges from the specific constraints and affordances of the dinosaurian body and the Mesozoic inheritance of sensory systems, locomotion, and sociality. The evolution of sapiens is thus a process shaped by contingency, but not exclusive to one path. In the absence of the asteroid, with the continuity of life preserved, the potential for intelligence blooms in unfamiliar forms: bipedal, feathered, saurian, and deeply adapted to a world that never lost its most ancient architects. The Earth of 2025 in this alternate timeline bears little resemblance to the modern planet shaped by human industry, agriculture, and geopolitical forces. Without the Chicxulub impact and its ensuing mass extinction, the age of dinosaurs never ends, and the planet follows an entirely different evolutionary and ecological trajectory. In this world, mammalian dominance never materializes, and the evolutionary niches filled by elephants, primates, whales, and humans are occupied by the descendants of non-avian dinosaurs, creatures shaped by over 66 million years of uninterrupted natural selection. Landscapes, climates, and biodiversity all bear the imprint of a world that evolved without the disruption of the KPG extinction, creating an Earth that is both alien and vividly alive. At the top of the food chain are the sapient dinosaur, sentient, intelligent species that have undergone millions of years of cognitive and cultural development. Their civilizations are widespread across the continents, but their technological and environmental footprints differ drastically from humanity's. Rather than concrete cities and sprawling industrial networks, their settlements tend to integrate with the environment. Some build high in the forest canopy, others in canyon systems or around geothermal vents, depending on their evolutionary heritage and ecological niche. Their tools and architecture often utilize organic materials, stone, and perhaps early metals, although their path to industrialization diverges from the carbon-heavy trajectory of humans. These dinosaurian sapiens have developed systems of knowledge, astronomy, agriculture, and likely some form of communication, possibly written or symbolic, but also deeply sensory, utilizing vocalizations, feather displays, and body language. Some societies may be tribal and nomadic, others sedentary with sophisticated infrastructure. Their organization is determined not by the accident of mammalian bipedalism or the opposable thumb, but by what evolution has provided them: grasping digits, high visual acuity, strong olfactory senses, and long-term memory supported by a brain architecture inherited from their Cretaceous ancestors. In regions with rich natural resources and favorable climate, these societies may have progressed into the early stages of space observation or even low-orbit exploration. The absence of humans has profound implications for planetary health. Forests still cover vast swaths of the continents, unfragmented by roads, farmland, and urban development. Megafaunal species, both herbivorous and carnivorous, continue to shape ecosystems through grazing, predation, and migratory behaviors. Large sauropods still move across open plains in slow, thunderous herds, maintaining grassland ecosystems in the way elephants or bison once did. Massive hadrosaurs and ceratopsians browse and strip entire regions of vegetation before moving on, with their waste fertilizing the soil and their movements dispersing seeds and pollens. Airborne biodiversity is dominated by a dazzling array of avian and non-avian dinosaurs. Large feathered flyers, descendants of dromaeosaurs or pterosaurs that survived in marginal niches, still inhabit cliff faces and coastal regions, using dynamic soaring and thermal uplift in their flight strategies. Smaller flyers dominate forest canopies, filling the air with their territorial calls, mating displays, and foraging songs. Their plumage is a riot of color, used in courtship, camouflage, and communication. Some species may be converging on ecological roles similar to parrots, corvids, or bats, combining intelligence with mobility to become key seed dispersers or ecosystem engineers. The oceans, too, are vastly different. With no great extinction to clear marine niches, the Mesozoic mosaic of marine reptiles and fish continues. Large mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, if not pushed out by marine mammals, which never radiated, still dominate the top predator roles. Ammonites and other shelled cephalopods may have diversified instead of vanishing, maintaining their complex ecological relationships with fish, marine reptiles, and other invertebrates. Coral reefs are more diverse, unbleached by industrial climate disruption, and teeming with creatures whose lineages never went extinct. Some niches still belong to early cetaceans or primitive aquatic mammals, but most are filled by fish, marine reptiles, or aquatic birds. Mammals in this world remain a mostly peripheral group. Still small, nocturnal, and specialized for marginal habitats, they have not achieved the ecological dominance or morphological variety seen in our timeline. Many are analogous to shrews, moles, gliders, and burrowers, surviving in dense underbrush, tree hollows, and underground networks. Some lineages may have developed aquatic lifestyles akin to otters or platypuses, but no great apes, cetaceans, or elephants have emerged. In many places, mammals are prey species or scavengers, rarely reaching higher than the bottom layers of the food web. Climate patterns on this Earth have followed a different course. Without the nuclear winter caused by the Chicxulub impact, the climate has never experienced a catastrophic cooling event. The late Cretaceous warmth extends well into the early Cenozoic, allowing tropical forests to flourish across much of the globe. Volcanic activity, such as the continued eruptions of the Deccan Trap, still contributes greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, but these are absorbed and balanced by vast forest ecosystems and oceanic algae blooms. Over time, tectonic movement still raises mountain chains like the Himalayas and causes polar glaciation, but without the feedback loops from anthropogenic emissions, climate change is slower and more regional in character. The continents are in roughly the same positions as in our timeline, but biogeography is starkly different. North America, still lush with wet forests and sprawling savannas, is home to numerous dinosaurian species, both intelligent and animalistic. South America remains a biodiversity hotspot with isolated species that have diverged due to long-term geographic separation. Africa supports ecosystems dominated by titanosaur descendants, armored ankylosaurs, and fierce abelisaurs, some of which may now be sapient or semi-sapient. Eurasia contains complex mosaics of temperate forests and steppes populated by migrating herds and advanced dinosaurian cultures. Australia, isolated for tens of millions of years, is a haven for bizarre evolutionary experiments. Flightless predatory birds, gliding feathered reptiles, and venomous descendants of ancient coelurosaurs. Language and communication among intelligent dinosaur species may take diverse forms. Some may use ultraviolet feather displays and rhythmic vocalizations akin to songbirds. Others may use pheromonal signaling or complex movement patterns, akin to bee dances or cuttlefish chromatophores. Writing, if it exists, could be gestural, symbolic, or even auditory, encoded in drums, whistles, or carved symbols on bark, stone, or bone. This results in a rich tapestry of culture not bound by human paradigms of literacy or technological progress, but nonetheless representing advanced cognition and societal complexity. Technological advancement may not follow a linear path. Without fossil fuels, metal ores, or large-scale agriculture, development might be slower or more sustainable. Societies might invest in bioengineering, using domesticated species or symbiotic organisms to perform tasks cleaning, signaling, or construction. Other civilizations might focus on astronomical understanding, seasonal tracking, or philosophical systems rooted in natural cycles and interdependence. The result is a world that has not been industrialized in the same sense as Earth today, but one that has reached intellectual and ecological maturity in its own right. Planetary health in this alternate 2025 is vastly better. There is no ozone hole, no plastic pollution in the oceans, no mass extinction caused by deforestation or industrial runoff. Global temperatures are within the range of natural fluctuation, and biodiversity is orders of magnitude higher. Megafauna continue to regulate carbon cycles, shape plant distributions, and provide the evolutionary pressures necessary for complexity. Carbon dioxide levels are elevated but buffered by forests, algae, and long-term weathering processes. Earth's atmospheric and oceanic systems remain robust, regulated by natural feedback loops that have had millions of uninterrupted years to stabilize. The visual appearance of Earth from orbit would reveal a planet greener, more vibrant, and far more dynamic in its biosphere. Urban centers of sapient dinosaur species might be harder to detect from space blending into forest canopies, coastlines, or mountainous regions constructed from biodegradable materials and carefully integrated into the ecosystem. The planet would lack the stark artificial illumination of cities at night, the straight lines of highways and runways, or the vast scars of open-pit mining and industrial agriculture. Instead, the Earth would pulse with organic patterns, migratory routes, blooming cycles, and the seasonal shifts of vast, untouched biomes. It is possible, even likely, that multiple intelligent species coexist across continents in this alternate Earth, each with their own languages, philosophies, cosmologies, and technologies. Their relationships with one another could range from cooperation to territorial conflict. There may be federations of tribes, empires guided by ancestral memory, or entirely novel political structures based on consensus, display, or ritualized combat. Their art might involve plumage arrangement, scent trails, or musical performance. Their science might be oral, seasonal, or embedded in natural observation rather than abstract theorization. In this alternate 2025, the Earth is not less advanced than our own, but differently advanced following a separate evolutionary thread that never required hominins to dominate the planet. It is a living world shaped by deep time, diverse intelligences, and ecological continuity. The absence of humans does not mean the absence of thought, creativity, or ambition. Instead, it means that intelligence alien in form, but familiar in function, has flourished in ways we can only begin to imagine, giving rise to a world more ancient, more harmonious, and perhaps more enduring than our own. In order to vividly illustrate this alternate evolutionary timeline, a robust set of visuals and media reconstructions is essential. They do not merely serve aesthetic purposes but become instrumental in helping scientists, educators, and speculative enthusiasts understand and immerse themselves in this world where dinosaurs never went extinct. These illustrations, simulations, and reconstructions enable a more grounded appreciation of the evolutionary trajectories, ecological landscapes, and potential sentient species that characterize this alternate Earth of 2025. A primary component of the visual narrative is the timeline chart that maps the divergence from the real-world historical path beginning 66 million years ago. At this node, the Chicxulub asteroid either misses Earth entirely or burns up in the atmosphere, becoming an atmospheric event without catastrophic consequences. This timeline traces a continuous line of dinosaur evolution through the Cenozoic era, free from the bottleneck effect that mass extinction imposed on Earth in our timeline. The timeline should be detailed, spanning from the late Cretaceous through epochs analogously labeled for continuity: Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, Miocene, Pliocene, Pleistocene, and Holocene, each filled with the emergence of new species, ecological interactions, and cultural developments among sentient dinosaurian beings. Unlike the mammalian-dominated epochs of our history, this alternate sequence showcases dinosaurian megafauna, diverse marine reptiles, and gradually emerging sapient species. Complementing the timeline is an evolutionary species tree. This visual branches out from established late Cretaceous clades, following troodontids, dromaeosaurs, and oviraptorosaurs as they diversify in the absence of extinction. The tree illustrates speculative yet plausible offshoots: bipedal raptorids evolving greater cognitive capacity, advanced vocal communication, and eventually tool manipulation; ceratopsians adapting to Arctic climates, developing dense fur-like protofeathers; sauropods becoming semi-aquatic or fully aquatic giants in coastal environments. This species tree would depict major divergence points, convergent evolution with known mammalian niches, and clear distinctions between lineages that led to intelligence versus those that remained purely animalistic. To bring these speculative organisms to life, concept art is indispensable. Artists working alongside paleontologists and evolutionary biologists can reconstruct creatures with plausible anatomy, biomechanics, and coloration. A sapient descendant of troodontids might be illustrated with a streamlined body, long grasping digits, and large binocular eyes capable of night vision and nuanced social cues. Plumage could be iridescent or patterned, used for communication and mating. These beings might carry tools crafted from bone, wood, or even stone, indicating their ability to shape their environment. Others may live in coastal regions, with webbed limbs and insulating feathers, crafting fishing nets from fibrous plants and shells. These visualizations must maintain scientific plausibility, respecting constraints like thermoregulation, energy efficiency, and reproductive biology. Beyond individual species, panoramic reconstructions of entire ecosystems allow for immersive storytelling. Massive floodplains dominated by herds of hadrosaurs and armored ankylosaurs can be contrasted with highland ecosystems where agile predatory dromaeosaurs pursue arboreal prey. Coastal mangroves might teem with amphibious ceratopsians and long-necked plesiosaurs. Swampy delta regions could be home to semi-aquatic spinosaurs, while alpine zones host feathered raptors specialized for gliding and cliff nesting. These ecological snapshots depict not only biodiversity, but also the complex interdependencies and energy flows that sustain these alternate worlds. Climate maps of Earth in the alternate 2025 can show warm equatorial forests stretching further poleward due to the lack of mass extinction-induced cooling. Glaciation at the poles would occur differently, possibly delayed or moderated by the consistent presence of mega-herbivores that impact atmospheric CO2 through their metabolic and ecological functions. Mapping biodiversity zones reveals unexpected distributions, such as feathered carnivores adapted to tundra or semi-aquatic giants populating once inhospitable deserts thanks to evolved water retention systems. These maps provide a macro-scale view of how evolutionary pressures shape biospheres over tens of millions of years. Sociocultural visuals are also crucial. Depictions of intelligent dinosaurian societies show how culture and technology evolve in non-human contexts. Art could show communal nesting grounds, ritual displays using bioluminescent plumage, or early architectural structures resembling termite mounds or cliffside villages. Tools might include woven materials, carved stone implements, and perhaps rudimentary symbols etched into bones or cave walls. Artistic reconstructions should consider the cognitive limits and possibilities inherent in dinosaurian neurology. What kind of art do they make? How do they represent memory and history? Do they create language-based systems or rely on dance, scent, and color as mnemonic tools? Animations and simulations add dynamic context. Computer-generated reconstructions could animate predator-prey interactions, migratory behaviors, mating displays, and group hunting strategies. Sapient dinosaurian societies could be modeled to simulate their urban development, territorial expansion, and interspecies diplomacy or conflict. These animations should not merely entertain but explore scientifically grounded hypotheses. For instance, how long does it take a raptorid species to develop fire use if given 60 million uninterrupted years? What are the environmental consequences of industrialization by a non-human species? Augmented and virtual reality applications would provide users the opportunity to walk through these ecosystems, observe creatures in their natural habitat, and interact with sapient dinosaurian civilizations. Educational tools might include AR overlays on fossil specimens that visualize the alternate evolutionary paths those organisms might have taken. Museums and educational institutions can use holographic exhibits to compare real and speculative organisms side by side, fostering critical thinking about evolutionary biology and contingency. Interactive digital media like games and simulations would allow users to manage ecosystems, make evolutionary decisions, or role-play as members of intelligent dinosaurian tribes. These platforms can incorporate real scientific constraints, energy budgets, climate variables, mutation rates to teach players about the delicate balances required to sustain life and intelligence. Scientific infographics distill complex ideas into accessible formats, charts showing brain-to-body ratios over time, comparisons of locomotion styles, or adaptations to climate gradients. These visuals provide context for deeper understanding and help non-specialists grasp the plausibility and intricacies of this alternate world. They also highlight the speculative elements by marking where evidence ends and informed conjecture begins. All these media serve as more than supplementary illustrations. They become an extension of scientific inquiry. Just as paleontological reconstructions inform our understanding of the distant past, speculative visuals of this alternate Earth challenge us to consider what evolution is capable of producing when unimpeded by cataclysm. They underscore the power of natural selection, the adaptability of life, and the vast potentialities that remain unexplored in our own evolutionary history. Through rigorous design grounded in science, these images and media breathe life into a world that could have been, offering a profound counterfactual lens through which to view the story of Earth and its myriad creatures. Building a compelling and scientifically credible alternate history where the Chicxulub asteroid never struck Earth requires not only imagination, but a foundation rooted firmly in established scientific disciplines. To ensure that this narrative remains grounded, we must draw from paleontology, evolutionary biology, geology, climatology, comparative anatomy, and cognitive science. While speculative, this exercise is not unmoored from empirical evidence. Instead, it extends trajectories already visible in the fossil record and modern biology to plausible extremes over tens of millions of years. The cornerstone of this alternate history is paleontological data, which provides insight into the diversity, anatomy, and behavior of Cretaceous lifeforms. The fossil record shows that many groups of dinosaurs, particularly Maniraptoran theropods such as dromaeosaurs and troodontids, were already exhibiting traits commonly associated with intelligence and adaptability. Fossils of these creatures reveal large relative brain sizes, stereoscopic vision, grasping limbs, and complex feather arrangements, all precursors to advanced cognition. Their nesting behaviors, including evidence of brooding and parental care, point to social complexity comparable to that seen in modern birds and mammals. Evolutionary biology provides the framework for hypothesizing how such traits could be further refined under uninterrupted selection pressures. Key principles such as adaptive radiation, convergent evolution, and coevolution are central to projecting the long-term development of dinosaurian species. For instance, if troodontids continued evolving larger brains and more dexterous limbs, natural selection would favor increasingly complex problem-solving, social structures, and perhaps eventually language. These processes do not require science fiction-level leaps, but rather long stretches of uninterrupted evolutionary time and ecological opportunity. Comparative anatomy, especially studies of avian and reptilian neurology, allows us to infer the sensory and cognitive capacities of extinct species. Birds, the only surviving dinosaurs, offer a living model for how brain function might have evolved in non-avian relatives. Corvids, parrots, and pigeons exhibit problem-solving skills, memory, planning, and tool use. Their encephalization quotients, though structurally different from mammalian brains, are comparably effective in many cognitive domains. By comparing the neurological architecture of birds with inferred structures from dinosaur fossils, scientists can extrapolate the potential for sentient dinosaurian descendants. Geology and climatology play key roles in shaping the environmental context in which evolution unfolds. In this alternate timeline, the absence of the impact event avoids the global climate catastrophe known as the Cretaceous Paleogene, KPG, mass extinction. The continued presence of large herbivores and their ecological functions would influence global carbon cycles, vegetation patterns, and even the evolution of flowering plants. Tectonic activity, such as the uplift of the Himalayas or the opening of the Atlantic Ocean, would still proceed, influencing weather patterns and biogeographical distribution. Modeling such climate dynamics using paleoclimate simulation tools allows for plausible reconstructions of long-term environmental stability or variability in this scenario. Technological tools enhance the scientific feasibility of this alternate history. Simulation models like Climber, Gini, or Earth System Models (ESMs) can be used to estimate climate variables under the assumption that megafauna populations persist and continue shaping ecosystems. Evolutionary simulation platforms, including agent-based models and digital evolution environments like Avida, can explore the emergence of cooperation, social learning, and tool use in hypothetical dinosaur populations over thousands of virtual generations. These simulations provide probabilistic outcomes based on parameters derived from known biology, allowing a more structured approach to speculating about future evolution. Another line of support comes from ethology and behavioral ecology. Modern reptiles and birds exhibit a wide range of learned behaviors, mating systems, and foraging strategies that are strongly shaped by ecological constraints and opportunities. Observations of Kia parrots collaborating, tool use among New Caledonian crows, or complex vocal communication among lyrebirds illustrate the kinds of behaviors that might arise in intelligent dinosaurian species. These case studies inform how culture and intelligence might evolve in taxa structurally different from primates, yet capable of parallel cognitive achievements. The alternate timeline also necessitates understanding of how coevolution shapes ecosystems. If herbivorous dinosaurs continue to exert selective pressures on plants, we would expect continued arms races between flora and fauna to offer foliage, defensive toxins, and specialized feeding mechanisms. Pollination systems might diversify with insect and small dinosaur pollinators. Fungal networks, which facilitate nutrient exchange and symbiotic relationships, could become increasingly complex, supporting vast, interconnected forest biomes. This reciprocal dynamic is modeled in real ecosystems and can be extended into speculative scenarios using established ecological theory. The feasibility of sapient dinosaurs creating tools and developing technology is also reinforced by studies of biomechanics and fine motor skills. Troodontids and other maniraptorans had three-fingered hands, including a semi-opposable digit. Their wrist structures allowed for flexion similar to the motion required in grasping or manipulating objects. With sustained selection and increasing reliance on tool use, these features could become refined to the point of crafting and using complex instruments. Further plausibility is added by considering the fossil and archaeological records contingency. Human evolution was not a guaranteed outcome. It relied on a unique convergence of climate variability, bipedalism, environmental pressures, and ecological opportunities. The alternate history explored here doesn't suggest that intelligence must arise, but that under different circumstances, with evolutionary pathways left unbroken, it can arise from different origins. This supports the broader astrobiological premise that life, if given time and complexity, can evolve intelligence in many forms. Ethical and philosophical perspectives also shape the framework for evaluating such speculative histories. They challenge anthropocentric views of intelligence and civilization, reminding us that sentience is not necessarily a human monopoly. Exploring the feasibility of alternate sapient species fosters greater humility and a deeper understanding of life's potential trajectories. These ideas resonate with the emerging field of speculative evolution, which uses scientific extrapolation rather than fantasy to explore hypothetical ecosystems and organisms. Finally, the speculative elements in this alternate history are clearly distinguished from evidence-based extrapolations. While artistic interpretations of intelligent dinosaurs, cultural behaviors, and technologies remain hypothetical, they are constructed on a scaffold of credible biological and ecological principles. This transparency, acknowledging where inference ends and speculation begins, maintains scientific integrity while fostering imaginative exploration. In sum, the feasibility of a world without the Chicxulub impact rests on a strong foundation of evolutionary science, fossil evidence, climatological modeling, and biomechanical analysis. While speculative, it remains tethered to the known capabilities and trajectories of life on Earth. By following these alternate threads logically and rigorously, we gain not only a compelling vision of what might have been, but also a deeper appreciation of the intricacies, constraints, and serendipities that shape all evolutionary paths, including our own. Contemplating a world in which the Chicxulub impact never occurred opens profound avenues for reflection, scientific, philosophical, and ethical. The exploration of this alternate history not only provides insight into the contingency and directionality of evolution, but also forces us to question the uniqueness of the human experience. It compels a deeper understanding of life's adaptability, the factors that catalyze or curtail complexity, and the potentially arbitrary nature of what we perceive as inevitable outcomes. First, the very premise underscores the contingency of evolution. The extinction of approximately 75% of all species 66 million years ago, including most non-avian dinosaurs, was not a predetermined necessity, but the result of a singular high-impact event. Without it, life's trajectory might have followed an entirely different route. The dominance of mammals, the rise of primates, and ultimately the emergence of humans were facilitated, not foreordained. The imagined survival and flourishing of dinosaurs over the Cenozoic and beyond highlight how easily the evolutionary script could have been rewritten with a minor alteration in cosmic alignment. The alternate timeline starkly illustrates that many evolutionary milestones are less the product of inevitability and more the residue of survivorship and chance. Mass extinctions, though often viewed as catastrophic, have historically been catalysts for evolutionary innovation. They reset ecological balances, open up niches, and allow previously marginalized species to radiate and diversify. The KPG extinction, in particular, cleared the way for mammals to expand into roles once dominated by reptiles. In its absence, the evolutionary creativity fostered by recovery from devastation is instead replaced by the deepening of established trends. This alternate Earth sees dinosaurs continuing their adaptive radiation, developing complexity over continuity rather than resurgence. This distinction prompts valuable insights into the dual nature of extinction events as both destroyers and accelerants of diversification. This thought experiment also emphasizes the non-linearity and plurality of evolutionary success. It refutes the anthropocentric notion that humans or even mammals were destined to inherit the Earth. If dinosaurs had continued to dominate terrestrial ecosystems, mammals might have remained marginal, their full potential unrealized. In such a world, intelligence and culture might still arise, but not from primates. Instead, sentience could have emerged from feathered theropods or even from an entirely different clade altogether. This notion reframes the question of human uniqueness. Are we a cosmic inevitability or a fortunate accident? The alternate timeline leans toward the latter, emphasizing the role of stochastic events and environmental filtering. Reflecting on the possibility of non-human intelligence, particularly among dinosaurian descendants, raises important philosophical questions. What is the essence of sentience? If a bipedal descendant of troodontids were to evolve art, language, religion, and cities, how would we recognize their culture? Would their value systems align with ours? What would their ethics, aesthetics, and societal structures look like, evolved from different neural architectures and ecological pressures? Such questions challenge the boundaries of our understanding of consciousness and cultural evolution, suggesting that intelligence is a broader phenomenon than human history alone suggests. In considering the ethical dimensions of this speculative timeline, one must also confront the implications of sapient, non-human life. If an intelligent dinosaurian species developed agriculture, industry, and even space exploration, how might their ecological footprint compare to humanity's? Would they develop more harmonious relationships with nature, or fall into similar patterns of exploitation and environmental degradation. The alternate Earth scenario presents a parallel mirror in which to reflect on our own stewardship of the planet. It invites humility, reminding us that our rise was not preordained and that intelligence alone does not guarantee sustainability or wisdom. This alternate history also has implications for astrobiology and the search for life beyond Earth. It reinforces the idea that life, given sufficient time and stable conditions, can develop complexity multiple times over. The rise of sentience need not be rare if multiple lineages such as dinosaurs and mammals possess latent cognitive potential. On exoplanets with biospheres older than Earth's and without cataclysmic disruptions, multiple intelligent species might co-evolve or rise in sequence. Thus, examining the unbroken evolution of dinosaurs offers not only insights into Earth's possible futures, but also templates for evaluating life elsewhere. Speculative evolution, as exercised in this scenario, also contributes to scientific literacy. It encourages critical thinking, interdisciplinary synthesis, and creativity within the framework of established knowledge. When boundaries between what is known and what is plausible are transparently maintained, such exercises foster deeper engagement with evolutionary science. They also help combat deterministic and teleological narratives, showing that life is an unfolding process shaped as much by randomness as by adaptation. Finally, reflecting on this alternate world prompts reconsideration of our own responsibilities as the planet's current dominant species. The survival and success of any intelligent life form depend not just on biological evolution, but on cultural, social, and ethical evolution as well. If intelligent dinosaurs had evolved, they too would face existential decisions about technology, environment, and coexistence. Their imagined struggles serve as allegories for our real ones. What kind of legacy will humanity leave, knowing we arose not through destiny but through chance? How might we respect the precariousness of our place in Earth's long history? In conclusion, the exercise of imagining Earth without the Chicxulub impact is not mere fantasy, but a rich and scientifically grounded reflection on evolution's unpredictable path. It reminds us that intelligence is not a guaranteed endpoint, that extinction can shape life as profoundly as survival, and that the story of Earth could have been written in many different scripts. By examining this alternate timeline, we gain not only perspective on what might have been, but clarity on what is and what might still become. The speculative journey through an alternate Earth where the Chicxulub asteroid never struck and non-avian dinosaurs continued their evolutionary reigns illuminated the intricacies and contingency of life's development on this planet. By removing a single yet monumental event from Earth's geological narrative, we see how dramatically different the outcome might have been. This final reflection draws together the threads of our exploration, the paleontological foundation, the ecological dynamics, the trajectories of evolution, and the emergence of intelligence. We began with an analysis of the real-world Chicxulub impact, which irrevocably altered life on Earth. The evidence supporting its role in the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event is extensive and robust, and its consequences were transformative. This impact opened a path for mammals to rise from obscurity, eventually leading to the emergence of humans. In our alternate scenario, this path diverged. The asteroid either missed or disintegrated harmlessly in the atmosphere, and the Earth's biosphere remained undisturbed at a global scale. Dinosaurs, both large and small, continued to evolve, diversify, and dominate the ecosystems of a changing planet. Through this lens, we have traced the possible continuities and novelties of evolution. Intelligent life, far from being a human-exclusive phenomenon, could plausibly arise from other clades such as troodontids or oviraptorosaurs. These dinosaurian lines, already displaying significant neurological and behavioral complexity, represent credible candidates for the emergence of technological societies. Their potential ascent to sapience demonstrates that intelligence is not a singular, linear achievement, but a possible endpoint of multiple evolutionary experiments. Evolution does not strive toward humanity. It adapts and innovates in response to ever-changing pressures and opportunities. Meanwhile, mammals in this alternate world would have continued their slow and constrained evolution in the ecological shadows of dinosaurs. The absence of mass extinction would mean the absence of vacated niches, preventing mammalian expansion into the diversity we know today. Even so, mammals would adapt in subtle and sophisticated ways, perhaps evolving gliders, swimmers, burrowers, and nocturnal omnivores that mirror but do not match our current biodiversity. Their development highlights how ecological opportunity and competitive exclusion shape evolutionary success. Floral and faunal ecosystems would have co-evolved under different pressures, yielding a world filled with massive herbivorous dinosaurs and the towering forests that supported them. Angiosperms, fungi, and insects would follow their own complex paths of co-adaptation, establishing symbiotic networks and feeding systems molded by different keystone species. Without human agriculture or industrialization, Earth's biosphere in 2025 would likely be more intact, more lush, and more balanced than it is today. Biodiversity, in the absence of anthropogenic pressures, could be even more varied than what we currently observe. Climate and geological forces would still shape the physical Earth, from the rise of mountain ranges to the drift of continents. However, without the cooling and upheaval following the KPG boundary, the climate might have remained more stable in the short term, allowing long-established ecosystems to flourish without dramatic resets. Over tens of millions of years, tectonics and volcanism would still lead to eventual cooling trends, perhaps even glaciations, but the biosphere would have time to adapt gradually. This alternate Earth reminds us of the incredible resilience and inventiveness of life. Even in the absence of the familiar path that led to us, evolution would have continued crafting new forms, interactions, and intelligences. The imagined civilizations of sapient dinosaurs, whether city-building raptors or technologically adept oviraptorosaurs, represent more than just a speculative fantasy. They offer a different expression of what intelligence might look like, grounded in biological plausibility. Throughout this project, scientific rigor has served as a backbone. From evolutionary biology and paleontology to climatology and simulation models, each facet of this timeline has been built upon well-supported principles. Where speculation was necessary, it was clearly delineated and cautiously extrapolated from available data. This approach enhances not only the plausibility of the narrative, but also its value as a pedagogical and philosophical tool. The exercise ultimately challenges us to rethink what we consider inevitable. Humanity's rise, so often portrayed as the crown of evolution, is here revealed as one of many possible outcomes. Our existence rests on a knife's edge of events, cataclysms avoided or endured, paths taken or blocked. Recognizing this contingency fosters a deeper appreciation for the fragility and preciousness of the biosphere, as well as a renewed respect for the nonlinear, branching nature of life's history. Moreover, this reflection offers insights into broader scientific inquiries. In the context of astrobiology, it lends support to the notion that life, given enough time and environmental stability, might commonly evolve toward complexity-driven intelligence. In ethics and philosophy, it encourages humility, curiosity, and empathy toward other sentient beings, hypothetical, or real. And in science communication and education, it demonstrates how speculative narratives, when firmly rooted in evidence, can spark engagement and deepen understanding. Looking forward, there is ample opportunity to expand on this alternate Earth. Future research could simulate specific evolutionary lineages using digital evolution platforms, or develop climate and ecological models that capture the subtleties of a dinosaur-dominated biosphere. Comparative studies could further investigate neurological and cognitive potential across avian and reptilian lineages. Artistic reconstructions could visualize these speculative ecosystems, offering powerful visual complements to scientific storytelling. In closing, this project has traversed a world that might have been a world where the dinosaurs never died out, where intelligence found other paths, and where Earth's narrative unfolded along a different thread of possibility. By walking this path, we come away not only with an appreciation for what might have been, but also for what is. Our world, shaped by chance and change, is unique not because it was destined to be so, but because it simply survived. In that survival lies both its fragility and its wonder.